Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Hey, do me a favor. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for the notifications. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you do that 5-star. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. I don't know about you guys, but I know personally this last year and a half has been my life going all the way down in a spiral between the economy, closing my business, family, kids, everyday life pulling me in different directions. I don't know which way's up and which way's down anymore. I felt like I was alone. I felt like I had nobody to talk to. I felt like I was a burden on my family. But thankfully, BetterHelp hooked me up. They hooked me up with a licensed therapist. And you know, the coolest thing about them, if you're not happy with the therapist that you're talking to, you can switch therapists at any time, no charge. I mean, you can do all this from the comfort of your home, from your phone, tablet, laptop, computer, whatever. All you have to do is take a 5-minute survey, and usually within 48 hours, BetterHelp will have you connected with a licensed therapist. There's no stigma to talk to a therapy anymore. Everybody's talking to a therapist. I'm telling you, man, you'll feel so much better getting a grasp on top of that mental health. You'll be able to open up and feel better about yourself and life. I'm telling you now, BetterHelp hooked me up, and they're going to hook you up. Use that promo code EverydayBS. So it's BetterHelp.com/EverydayBS, and BetterHelp will take 10% off your first month of therapy. So here's the chance, guys. Get connected, get hooked up, open up, talk to somebody. It's time to start chatting. Use BetterHelp. Hey, I appreciate you doing this, brother. I really do. When I came across your profile, man, and started reading some of the stuff you had posted, I was like, holy shit. Yeah, man, I want to reach out to this dude.
It sounds way cooler. Dude, I see the people on your show. Those are the real deal. Like, I don't consider myself anywhere near like these guys. You when you speak to tier guys, like, those are tier guys. Me, I'm background. I'm like the supply sergeant's, the guy he calls when he really has an issue.
It's guys like okay. Here, let's go back. My MOS, I was an 88 Mike. I was a truck driver. Okay, and I didn't do shit. I never went anywhere. I didn't do anything. I stayed stateside, and that was it. That was my job.
Oh man, dude, 88 Mike and 92 Yankee, the truck driver and supply. Those were the two prerequisite jobs you wanted during the Iraq War. Everyone talks about you didn't want that because you'd be in a convoy. No, dude, that opened a million doors for different schools. You could. Like, do you think these truck drivers were in high demand for a reason? Yeah. You guys are the ones you had to be taught how to do the off-road courses, on-road. You had to know both laws. Yeah. I mean, as a technician, a truck driver, that opened the door as a government job.
We did some hazmat training through Fort Dix and stuff like that. So
cool shit. People just don't realize.
Yeah, and the sign-on bonus was shitty, man. I think it was like $3,000.
I didn't get one. I was one of those assholes who joined for duty, and I kicked myself in the ass every time. I never got a bonus.
I went through MEPS, and it was at the time MEPS was in Philadelphia, downtown Philadelphia. So I'm going through MEPS with this one cat, and he was going in Navy, and his MOS, his MOS, man. If I remember correctly, I could be off on this a little bit, so don't hold me to it.
There's a bunch of numbers. They change all the time.
MOS was nuclear submarine shit, and his
I know one of them.
AIT was 10 years.
I don't know any of them.
I'm like, I don't know if that's correct or not, but it was some type of nuclear engineering or some shit like that to do with subs and whatnot, man.
Dude, I don't know, 10 years. I mean, 10 years to get fully certified? Totally possible. Yeah. I mean, you need people at certain rates in the Air Force. You got to wait until you're like X amount of years in to get a level 7 and so on. So it makes sense. I thought I was long for doing 6 months of OSIT with the MPs. And then you hear about, and then I went to supply sergeant school. They got me my 92 Yankee so I can get a tech job. And that but I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to be there was 2 weeks of weapons, 2 weeks supply. And when I was there, I was with the National Guard Special Forces who were doing the pre-Q course. And those guys, like, I'm like, shit, talk about 2 years for these teams guys or these Special Forces guys for their jobs because they have to wait.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all looked into it and read it and spoken to the dudes, but to be National Guard Special Forces, it's even longer. You have to do a pre-Q course. And I'm like, well, shit, that's 3 years of knowing what you want to do. I couldn't do that. 10 years. That makes sense because nuclear shit, I know somebody that every time someone mentions something about the sub or anybody on the sub, and someone's able to not like assume, but deduct where they're going to be or when they're going to return, they have to change it. Like they'll add 2 weeks, take away a week. It's weird, but I mean, you got to have someone who's like misinformation almost.
So
weird
Brett,
job.
Let's dive into you a little bit. Let's get a little bit of background. Tell us who you are, where you're from, where you grew up.
Well, I'm Brett Lawrence. I'm a weapons specialist or weapons expert. Actually, I don't feel like an expert. There's always more to learn. And I was never a gun guy. I didn't grow up around guns. I'm a New Yorker from Long Island, who every summer, my father's from a dirt road farm in Arkansas, literal baby boomer, born in 46. So he'd bring us back and he'd be like, learn how to work the farm and do some stuff. He's like, learn how to sew, do everything that, that I did growing up. He's like, and then you guys can have your own fun. So when I was 14, I got to do the New York streets and got the best of both worlds. They're really, I feel like I didn't want for much growing up. We didn't have a lot of money, but didn't mean we were set back. I was rich in family, and New York, the next town is a blurred line 5 blocks over. So lots of experience. And it was one of those trips I was 19, I was with my brother, and we went to Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And we're driving back from West Memphis after just like what we call like a mini family reunion because there wasn't 300 people. And that's how big our family reunions are. They span 3 states. They meet at Conway Twitty's house, who I didn't know who that was until I was 20.
Nice.
I didn't know who he was.
Hell yeah, man.
That's my dad's his twin, basically. He is the spitting image of Conway Twitty without even trying to be. And he sings that song, Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man, like there's a duet, and that's what he's most famous for. But we used to go to family reunions at his lake house. And I didn't know that. We just would show up because that's our, great cousin or, great uncle or something. And never met him. Just went to his house a bunch of times. And so when I'm driving back, I had that feeling of, well, Dad was Air Force military police, back then security, back then air police during NOM. And my grandfather was an Army island hopper with the, the 96th Infantry, I think, the Deadeyes. They're called the Diamond Eyes. They had just 2 diamonds, like a blue and a white one. They're still around, but they were Army island hoppers in the Pacific. And so he had a really rich legacy, but he never wrote any of it down. And I always thought that was kind of to his detriment because he felt like he never did anything. But this dude was scouting islands before anybody launched on them. And I mean, I had his uniform and he had all those been there, done it. And he had his campaign hat. I still have it. It's every place he saw combat, he put a little star and a Sharpie, but he wrote every place he went. And it was Guadalcanal, and some of it he would just put a little supply box next to it to show that he was just there for a refill or something, but it was cool. And I'm like, shit, we all did stuff like that. Maybe I should write it down. And I did, but then I had a house fire, and that was all went to moot. So I was like, damn, that information never would have gotten out. And there's so much that I know about just weapons in general that I feel like people they just want to know, I mean, stuff like that you and I take for granted knowing.
Now,
so I mean, that's me.
You do some training courses for weapon handling and whatnot. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, contractually. The government, or I say the government, but it's really either the state calls me or my friends in the Army who are still doing it, and they'll be like, hey, you want to come teach a course? We don't have any LUTAC instructors. And that's just a new way of saying the military police firearms course. It's like it's like a walking pistol course. It's interesting. It's nothing more advanced than a little bit more what you teach the infantry guys. They're all being given pistols now, and it makes sense, but we're the military police were revamped during the Iraq War to be sort of like a line unit for some of them. They're bigger, they have way more armor and trucks, but that's also taught, hey, since you're out there and the infantry are in the shit, they're the ones getting shot at, and you're just taking up their position when they go forward. You might see some war crimes, so keep an eye out, and we're going to do a little bit more. We're going to give you bigger guns so you can kill them, which just don't tell them. You know, it's only if they snap. And I mean, we all heard it, and that's why the MPs had 6 Mark 19s in a platoon.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't better. We were just taught a little bit more, and then given overwhelming firepower and told you might gotta kill your brothers, but that's like the last thing you gotta worry about. So just remember we told you, and then forget about it for the rest of your career.
What got you involved with weapons and handling and all that good stuff?
Well, I hated that mentality. The whole military police, we're gonna teach you a little bit more, and like everybody else kind of dismissed it. And I was like, well, that's interesting because I'm not a gun guy, but like these are the people we're being taught to have camaraderie with, brotherhood, but you separate us for 6 months, like you're screwing up that momentum. So you're taught to be a thinker, and then you're singled out if you are, and you're also you're taught to also keep like things in the back of your mind, like, hey, you could get screwed over later, but that's not what you're supposed to be thinking when you're teaching weapons. So I kind of took that with me, and I made it more personal, and I call it empathetic. You know, like it's like working with dogs. You know, like you kind of have to go on instinct and stop worrying about what's going to happen. And I feel like you have to teach it, but don't just teach something, say it for a scare tactic, and then throw it to the side. If you're going to teach it, you got to teach all of it. And that's what got me into teaching. And the weapons were tag your
Gotcha.
I didn't expect the guns. Not at all.
How old were you when you decided to say, you know what, I'm gonna jump in. I want to put my name on the dotted line and take my oath?
I signed the dotted line July 30th, 2009. I was 19. And I remember because I'll never forget the day, because that's when they phased out the greens. I remember I missed that, and I was like, damn, like I grew up in the 90s, and every movie had the Army greens. It was iconic. And I really thought it looked so sharp. Those dress blues, not dress blues, those dress greens, you know, they were Army. And I was the first set that I was in my unit that had been given the dress blues and like fitted for them properly with everything, and been made to wear them. And that was really cool. Cause so I can't forget that July 30th, 2009. And then 10 years later, I got the retiree notice, and I was like, that's too soon.
Yeah. How many deployments total?
Oh man, I'm boring. I just had one to Guantanamo Bay. And I feel like, you know, to me, that's why I say I don't consider myself, I kept studying and teaching because I had nothing else to do. I mean, Monday through Friday, I was tagged on guns. And then on the weekends, I was with the National Guard every weekend. So, it took time away from the family, but it, you know, it definitely led to that. Like I had to feel like I had to keep going because I just missed Iraq. Didn't get my dress greens. You know, that was always going to stick in my side. My dress blues felt a little bare. My unit had gotten back from Iraq. And so like that was another thing. It's like, why do I feel like I have to go to war to feel like I did my career? Like I went with the Mastermind 9/11, spent a year, and like held myself back from punching the guy. I got restraint, you know. I know my job. I'm doing the right thing. You know, why do I feel like I have to prove it? And that always resonated with me. That was a big factor. Like as growing up, like why did I feel like I had to? It's okay, boy. Why did I feel like I had to prove to be a man to go to war? But like those dudes who went there, I sit and I listen. Everything they tell me, I always put it into class because I feel like, you know, I spent so much time in these simulators, so many times kicking doors, so many times getting like physical hand to hand that I, when I got these certificates, like, hey, you know, you're a great teacher, keep going, you know, I'm like, yeah, but I may have kicked 10,000 doors, but I haven't kicked that door. I want to hear from the real dude. So I'd bring in everybody, build a team, put a vet on it, send them on their way, build another team. And that's how I did that train the trainer thing through all of it. I always thought that was a great way to go through it.
When did you get the call like, hey, you know what? We need a weapons instructor?
2013 was when I got the call. They asked me to do it. It was more of a tag, you're it. It was like, hey, you know anything about weapons? And it was, well, I have all this training on these from the MP Corps, but I don't have the class for it. You know, that job says it was a technician job, so it was a government job as a civilian. But they were like, hey, you know, you need this as a precursor. So that's how I got sent to a supply sergeant school. And those dudes, they taught me everything. I got to hang out with the cavalry and figured out what a spur ride was. I traded beer to the 22nd, I think it was 22nd, out of Camp Landing. And this was all within a month of having gotten the offer. So it was really cool. And then I was in a month-long school in Florida and then back in New York for the birth of my son.
Once you get settled and everything's rocking and rolling for you, I mean, what are some of the main courses, and where are they sending you to different places, locations, travel?
The first school I was sent to was Camp Landing, Florida. That was the longest safety brief I've had at any base, and after that it was a whirlwind of OJT, you know, a state school. So I went to Camp Landing and had a 2-hour safety brief. There was nothing open, nothing around. The worst defect, but the best training. You had the 22nd National Guard. I think it's 22nd, but I'm terrible with numbers and units. I wasn't trained under them. They were there, and these dudes were like, I saw them going through all this cool training, and I'm like, hey, I'm learning these computer systems the Army doesn't use anymore for the first 2 weeks, called the SAMZ. We were using the SAMZ, and I was learning whatever system we had used prior, something with a bunch of acronyms that was in 2013 for 2 weeks. So I'm telling them, like, yeah, I'm bringing in Bud Light Lime and whatever for these into the barracks because we're in Army barracks. The Air Force is there with us. We're partying with them and then getting up and going to the school where we know we're not going to learn anything until the last 2 weeks, which for me was just weapons. So I got to hang out, and there was, you know, E7 active Army cap dudes who were like, hey, look, you're only going to be doing weapons. You've already trained on these. You know, your 2 weeks, if you show us you're actually good with them, we'll show you some cool shit. And so, like, I guess they had to see I was legit because I was the lowest ranked. And I kept saying, like, guys, I really don't need to learn how to feed an army. This is not going to be my job. But it turned out supply and requisitions and quartermaster was the most important thing I would ever learn. So that's why I said 92 Yankee, that precursor was great because the weapons parts and the distribution and repair and knowing your numbers and the 60% of repair order wasn't just a weapon. It was my time plus your time plus the parts plus the damage to the weapon versus the cost of the weapon. I had to know all of it. And that determined if the weapon was going to get repaired because I knew that I had to factor in that the repair parts were coming from the Army version of the Amazon warehouse, which was, what was that? The FedLog. You know, you go in, you see if it's got it and how long the shipping is, and you hit request, and then someone looks at it and says, you don't need that many gun parts, or you need more. You know, you burn through them too quick. So you got to take all that for granted. So I had to learn all of that in the time management. So OJT was great. I went to Camp Smith, New York. I went up by, what was that one? West Point. I got to do a couple MP details, and then they'd be like, hey, you're a tech, right? Go check out the shop. And I always felt weird. I'm like, this isn't my home. I'm just a guy who works on guns down in Jamaica. But they're like, no, go say hi. We got a couple gun guys. They'll teach you some shit. And I go in there, like, hey, did you learn the new stuff? I'm like, no, I'm still trying to make my own blackboard with the basics. They're like, well, here, take all these printouts. You know, if you're the guy down there, you have to know all of it. I'm like, okay, more homework. So I take it home with me. The worst idea. And I had to learn how to separate everything. It was a long time. It was learning how to balance life, work, the National Guard, the Army, myself, and that nobody actually cared. Like, it was only me, and then I had to ease into it and then, you know, learn how to balance it all correctly.
So
it was hard.
I mean, you're taking on a lot of shit and trying to figure out, you know, what's what, where you're going to go, how's this going to work, and, you know, getting it all put together. You know, in your mind, you're probably like, maybe I bit off more than I could chew at this moment, but, you know, I mean, we tend to, you know, overcome, and we do what we got to do to make things happen, man, to push forward. So you're basically a gunsmith too. So you're creating, putting together, you know, working on the weapons in general.
I worked on thousands and thousands of M16s and M4s that I learned the ins and outs and what to see, what to
Right.
look for. That it all went hand in hand. I did some courses on the side. I trained with some people. I put in a request for this document, and they said, "Yeah, you did. You've done the gunsmithing stuff. There's only X amount of people who've done that job during a time of war, so they wouldn't have worked on that many weapons. We'll give you your credentials." I was like, "Yeah, awesome." But it's the
Yeah.
government. You check boxes. The experience speaks for itself, and that's what I always felt. It was I learned through experience, and I learned through on the guns. It was through experience, and it was hands on. And with a lot of the stuff I taught, it was through the people I was
Right.
teaching. I would ask them, "How does it work? Like, what do you actually think about the M16 versus the M4?" And that's how I figured out that those new rounds were never going to work, even before they released the pressure tests. How the 50 cal had the heat barrel, and when they released the heat issue when they released the
Mhm.
M2A1, and it was we had to keep documenting watching it over time, and it sucked because there's nothing you could do. So I would send out the information every 2 weeks, and that was how I felt like I was doing my part. But I guess that figuring out how the heat and the metal wasn't properly heat treated computed into gunsmithing. And to me, I was like, well, gunsmiths, they really know what they're doing. Like, I've worked on this one model 10,000 times. That doesn't mean I'm great at that model. And they're like, dude, you know everything about that model. That makes you, put down specifically that you know that. So that's how I felt about it. I didn't feel like I had much to offer until I started really taking notes and like being like, oh shit, like you have done it. There's not many people who specifically do what you
Right.
do. Own it and push forward, dude. Like stop worrying about what other people are gonna say. It's you're in charge of your own sections. If they give you a gunsmith credential, take it and run. that yeah, that's what I did. I was like, fuck it, I'm
There you
taking it and
go.
running.
So you get these credentials, you're doing all this on the outskirts in the civilian world. I mean, are you able to use this on the civilian aspect?
New York's
Yeah.
weird. The laws are so obscure that I wasn't allowed to carry a firearm until I got a police carry. When Leosa, we saw in the laws as soldiers, we always saw like Coast Guard dude got released because he was carrying his pistol for work, and we're like, yes, eventually it's going to come around and we'll get an
Right.
ID. When I was in Guantanamo Bay, the Army's ID started getting issued saying we can carry. We are police officers. We just don't enforce the laws. You're there as a force multiplier. We're there to stop active shooters. We're there to stop terror threats. Do what you do best, but you have to pass this bullshit. You have to pass A, B, C, D. You have to take into consideration all the factors. So I ended up writing down half the checklists that the commanders used, and then eventually it became too much of a liability. Now they don't even want to push it. If you had the 442nd Military Police, where I spearheaded with Sergeant First Class Diaz. This dude he's such a badass that he won't take any credit, but he knows this dude wrote half the laws without even writing them. He just asked questions to the right people, and it seemed so hostile, but he was so sincere. He was just like, well, how are you going to say we can carry, but you're not going to back us up? And they're like, yeah, let's make an
Right.
ID. And so this dude's anger letters or anger questions, um, that everybody saw as hostile. He just wanted an answer to give his troops who kept asking the same question. So he spearheaded it, and me being in the weapons position, I was able to answer questions and talk to the higher ups. Now he was AGR, which is an active guard reserve. They're the guys who were there
Mhm.
24/7. So it was readiness and supply who gave me the answers to figure out what I needed to look forward, and then kind of be like, hey, look, if I can't carry, but you want me transporting guns, I can carry with my police ID. They're like, yeah. And I'm like, so why can't I train people to the standard? Like, if I have to train the MPs, like, and they're not getting the same training that I was, then can I train this dude who's been carrying a gun, for the past 20 years in civil crisis, like the hurricanes and everything, protecting us and backing up the police officers who's not an MP? That dude can carry too. And so that started a huge argument, which I had no effect on. But the infantry started saying, dude, give us pistols. And I was like, infantry's qualified. I'm like, they're fucking qualified. I'm like, you got a private manning the 50 cal, was fired at once. Like, in the MP Corps, we give it to our least
Right.
experienced. I'm like, give them pistols. Like these are the first frontline dudes we're backing up. Why do I have to say it? That makes no sense. So I just kind of I became a more calm voice of reason who looked at the scientific side, while the guys who had the experience were like, Brett, this is the question we want answered. Can you get us all that shit on paper? And I'm like, yeah, I'll put down some numbers for you. And so that's what my life became. It was repeating the old mantras in a new form. Like burn belly chest is no longer repeated in training. And I feel like that's the most important thing to figure out on an AR is how the bullet
Yeah.
falls. Because it could be the best AR in the world, but if you don't know that bullet's going to go 3 inches above where you're shooting, you're never going to hit anything. So you got to ask the old
Yeah.
questions. That's
No,
what I mean.
I know, I don't know a whole lot of the gun laws in New York and whatnot. I know recently, I don't know, I guess it's been like a year now, could be a little bit longer, but our governor, DeSantis, he signed off on the our concealed. So you don't need a permit to carry. You have a constitutional carry. So but you still got to abide by certain laws and whatnot, entering
Oh yeah.
buildings and this and this and whatnot. But I think it's fantastic. And I know, I lived in Michigan for a while, and they have an open carry. They also
Yep.
have, a concealed thing. But there's a gentleman I did a podcast with, Chad Lab, former Air Force tech sergeant. He's also he was a weapons instructor.
Oh, combat arms, they call them. Or they have a
Well,
specific
no,
job title.
he did this civilian wise. So he would teach
Okay.
classes on people to get their, concealed permit, and
For me, that's
yeah,
harder. I feel like you have to know both worlds. You have to teach both
yeah.
worlds. It's
But
harder.
and that's what he did for a while. But I mean, you're still in the New York area, am I correct?
Still here, actually. Diaz, the guy I was talking about, he's in Florida, and he goes back and forth. So I hear about the new Florida laws, and that famous sheriff he's in that specific county. That's
Oh,
funny, dude.
Grady?
He's great. Yeah, he's fucking great, man. He's
Fucking
hilarious.
Grady's the shit, man. I don't,
Dude, I love it.
dude.
Florida is awesome. I don't care what people say. If you want experience, like everybody says, oh, you want to do that?
Yeah.
Go to Florida. Why? It's
He,
awesome.
he just did one with, I'm not going to mention the club, but there was a person who was arrested for trying to meet up, if I'm correct, with a child, and he was arrested. And I don't know what fight club he was affiliated with. I'm not going to say any names, but they held the person's cut up during the interview. They were like, yeah, this dude. I was like, fucking Grady, man, he don't play no fucking games, man.
He doesn't care.
He's got that one thing too, man, where I think it's a wheel, and it's got the pegs on there, and it's like he'll spin the wheel and be like, all right, and wherever it stops, we're coming for you. You're the next on the hit list and some shit like that. But yeah, man.
He cracks me up,
Yeah.
dude. That's some of the shit but it's so true. Like, I mean, some of it's like, it's showboating. He has to. He's just, but then at the same time, it's like, he's
Yeah.
right.
I mean,
It's tough.
we have some really, I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right down the turnpike, you know what I mean? And
Yep. I know.
I grew up, yeah,
Scary
man, I grew
place.
up in Philly. I ran the streets like you did and whatnot. But I moved to Wildwood, New Jersey when I was younger, and then from there back to Philadelphia, and then from Philadelphia to Florida. And I traveled back and forth. And my wife and I was just talking about this. We're 11 years married, almost a little over, I think, 13 years now together. We have 2 kids and whatnot. But she has a great job here
God
in
bless.
Florida, man. And I'm actually working on a little something now. I've been a tattoo artist for over 20 something years. I've just closed my shop in April. So I'm pushing on the podcast and working with that and getting this going. But Florida is awesome, man. There's so much here. There's so much to do. Personally, I like our governor. There's some things, I don't get political on my podcast, but
Look, I get it. It's
Mhm.
important. It's just they don't care about me. I can't spend time
yeah,
caring about
I mean,
them.
I don't get involved with some of the shit, and I just, that's not my forte.
I was a liberal Kansas cop, city
Mm,
of liberal. So the most you in New York, when people are like, "Hey, you work with guns?" I'm like, "Yeah," but I spent a little time as a liberal cop. It just throws everybody for a
really?
loop. So I wanted to put that out there before I go. Oh, when I was in Kansas, I was there for a year. I I ran. Honestly, most people, the way I see it is NYPD. They get arrests a month, and it's usually something that they think is BS and it gets tossed or whatever. I had like 3 arrests a night, and I felt everything was justified. I never arrested anything I felt uncomfortable with. I said Kansas was the Wild West. It was great to go for a year and to
Yeah,
move back and get a federal job. So that when I see them like like the deputies and whatnot and the sheriff talking on TV, I'm like those guys are the ones who run the county. The county's where you
yeah.
don't fuck around. The city's where everything's a controlled
Hmm.
chaos. It's like the army. Where you go to Philly, you go out in the county and the city. That like, you don't go in the city too far. You don't go out in the
Yeah,
county too far. So when the sheriffs come for you, it's
yeah.
too late.
I mean, that's, it's like Philadelphia. I mean, the only time the sheriff's department was out and about was either to do something serious, to serve some type of warrant, because you had the city cops,
Or
and then it goes from the
yeah,
city cops to the sheriffs to the heavy duty guys. You know what I mean? So
yeah, the cities like they control it
yeah,
in a way that like they only give the sheriff so many jobs. At
right.
least in New York, I don't know how Philly runs, but like I said, I went to Philly. Philly was scarier than New York. It still
You
is to
know,
me. But there's like there's certain ways. There's where you go. Each city has something
yeah.
to offer.
I don't know, man. I haven't been to Philly in years, and from what I see and shit like that, man, it's not what it used to be.
Oh, the North Philly, where you used to have to like park at the circus. That's where was it the circus to get to the state, like that haunted state penitentiary that you had to park at like the
Yeah.
zoo. That's what it was. I remember I was there and I'm like, I grew up in Jamaica. My dad would bring us to his like he'd take us to the office and we work admin during the day, then go home to the
Mhm.
island at night. So the good food I knew was always in the city. So I'm with my friend. He's Dominican, he's like dark skinned. Everyone he always like jokes around that he's in the ghetto because we're in Elmont and we're in Jamaica. We're driving for honor guard at the time. And we go to North Philly and he's like, dude, don't stop the car. I'm like, dude, that's the soul food. The guy's selling it out of a van. We're stopping. Like, that shit's good. I can
Yeah.
smell it. And he's like, no, we're gonna get killed. I'm like, dude, I'm carrying fucking it's like 2014. I'm like, relax. Like, if they want to kill us, at least they're gonna die. One of them's gonna die first, and you're gonna get out of there. They're gonna be shooting at me. Relax. Let's get some food. I'm like, I'm the white guy
Yeah,
here. Relax.
there's a few things, man.
I, but you're safe with a white dude. That's you don't fuck with a white dude in a bad neighborhood. It brings the cops down. That's how I learned.
Dude, my son is just born. He's only a few months old. Wife and we take him to Philadelphia to see some family and shit like that, and we end up staying at my sister's house. So my wife and my sister takes her out on a little joyride through the city and stuff like that, and my wife sees these prostitutes underneath the L getting ready to fist fight, and my and she's like, man, stop, let me watch this. And my sister's like, no, we don't stop for this shit in the city. When you see shit like this go down, you just fucking keep on driving. We're gonna sit here and watch two prostitutes fist fight underneath the L, man. It's like, come on, bro. Hey guys, if you can't get up in the morning and you need a pick me up, I'm telling you now, Blackout Coffee, the coffee for America's warriors. That's right, America's warriors. It's the Be Awake, Don't Be Woke coffee. Tons of flavors, great taste, amazing coffee. So go to www.blackoutcoffee.com and at checkout, punch in Everyday BS. That's right, Everyday BS. So get yourself some. Have you trained or taught many classes, people that have, were in the military who've come out or going into the military for specific MOSs, for specific jobs, or certain federal titles where you have to teach them to handle properly and do this and do that?
That's awesome question, and it's more like people ask me. Like when I was in when I was every day, because I retired out of the army, but then I retired out of it was two different retirements. It's all the same shit. Just had the tech gave me one, and that's from the Department of Military Naval Affairs. And then one is the DoD and the U.S. Army, which is the medical retirement. So you get, VA basically. So through that, it was a lot of people would ask me like, "Hey, what do you know about these laws? I'm going for this permit." And I'm like, "Well, I know it's a lot easier if I write you a letter of recommendation, and I only did it for 3 people this year. Let me help you out." And like that's how I feel. It's like I'm putting it back out there. I'm not using my own knowledge for anything but helping these guys who are reaching out to me because they're going for something specific. So I'm like, well, it's not like I'm like, publishing a bunch of information. No one's going to care. And so I never really went towards like, I'm going to teach large classes. It was more like, hey, look, military, if you need me, I'm certified in A through Z. And I just, like you guys signed it. So don't forget, if you need me, I'm there. And so it's more, I keep studying, I keep learning, and as I go on, I'll bring it up to somebody when I'm doing like, my son right now is wearing a Chiller Theater shirt. I went there just to do the security, and I brought the canines, and that became an experience of, hey, this dude's running canine security, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I brought my dogs who are certified canines, and I'm security, but I'm just helping out. And so I ended up working with, like, I hang out with certain celebrities, and like they would ask for training. I would go to a friend who I'd won competitions with, and this is back sort of like backtracking a bit on that whole imposter syndrome thing. I would say, put it out of your head, because I'd have a whole team I taught, and they'd all be like, hey, yeah, but are we really certified? Because New York's laws keep changing, and I'm like, dude, like, you're certified as you can be, like, per this law, as far as I know. And then I'll ask somebody else, like Diaz, who has to know the most updated law, and it's so like, because he's traveling between New York and Florida, and even he's like, hey, dude, me and you are the only people who are certified to this level who have the state credentials. What do you think? And I'm like, oh, dude, I didn't look into that side. Let me research that. And that's how that kicks off. And so I get another little thing of knowledge every time somebody asks me a question, because I'm not going to look into it for myself if I'm not the one who has to worry about it. Because, I mean, I have my police Leosa carry. I'm certified to carry wherever retired officers and, whatever can carry right now. Why do I need to worry about the local permit? Then someone says, hey, you want to buy this pistol off me? I don't want it. I'm leaving the state. $50. And I'm like, well, we got to go to the gun store because New York, I'm too able to build my own stuff to where New York wouldn't be able to look at me and be like, we got to at least test him every now and again. So I'll get a text from somebody I don't know who says, hey, I know ABCD. You want to sell me a gun? I'm moving out of state. And I'm like, nah, you go to my gun store, dude. Like, if you think I'm this high gunsmith, why are you going to ask me to sell you a gun if you think, my guns cost X amount, but you want a cheap gun quick? Like, I know what you're up to. I did the game. I understand if I don't respond. I mean, either way, I'm not going to sell somebody a gun because everything I do is me signing off on it for life, basically. That's why I'm very thorough. But let's say I did, it's like, if I were to do that, that throws away my entire future for $300 now. Like, come on. Like, but if I didn't respond and if I just hit up the local PD and I was like, guys, leave me alone. Like, I know what you're doing. Then they'd be like, yeah, but if we don't test you every now and again, how are we going to keep you honest? And I'm like, that's not how this shit could work, man. It's like, I'm researching the laws. I'm playing by your rules. Like, if you want to keep me honest, give me a job so I can teach your local cops. Like, let me keep them honest, and you'll never have a bad PR campaign again. That's how thorough I am. Like, treat everybody like your goddamn neighbor. How hard is that? If you're not going to fuck over your neighbor for a quota because you got to go home at 6 p.m. and you're going to barbecue with that dude, show some respect. Life is that simple when it comes to, granted, there's semantics and there's bullshit, but it's that simple.
So let's go back a little bit. So, you get into the service, what's going through your mind when you first joined? Like, Did you have a specific plan in your head, what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go with it? Or was it just like, you know what, I'm signing up just to get the frick away and this is it? Or, did you have something specific planned out in your head? Like, hey, you know what? This is my goal. I want to get in there. I want to jump into this MOS. I want to learn this. I want to learn this and then move forward on that.
I mean, I bought into the American dream. I thought I was going to be Captain America, but at the same time, I was like, dude, I don't belong here. I am a book nerd. I hate running, and I'm like, we were taught, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Yeah, that old mantra you learned early on, but it was like you use it once. You're an MP. You use it once. You learn how it works. You let everybody go. You give them a break because if they're not cheating, they're not going to get around. This is the American Army. It's like, so even when I was like, wait, I'm supposed to tell them the wrong score so I don't fail out, but and it's like, well, I'm not going to fail. Like I did everything I could, but they want they want you to work as a team and show that you're not going to fuck over the next guy and he's not going to fuck over you. So that's when I was like, that's okay. Like I get the job, but I got to change it a bit now. So I was like, let me start. Like they're not going to, as National Guard, they're not going to choose my career for me. They're not going to say in 3 years, you're going to a new base, whatever. We already had the idea, like, okay, you're going to have to make a little bit more with less. You're like a Marine whose parents are rich, It's like, that's what you gotta look at it. You're like, your Army, but you're going to be given like the shittier end of the stick because you're state funded. So we're like, okay. So when we get back, my mind was, well, what deployment can I get on? Like, how can I jump my career a bit? I want to be active guard. Like, I like this lifestyle. I know that it's not all, like the Go Army and Army Strong like it was meant to be back in 2009, 2010. But we also know that the war in Afghanistan is still going. Good boy. And that, Iraq is slowing down, but that just means that we're going to have more shit to learn from and another war kicking off because we're looking at Syria at the time, Crimea's kicking off. It was, you had to pay attention. So I thought I was going to Afghanistan with the 101st Signal. And my son Hunter, my firstborn, he was born and he was like it was so weird because he's like, he has a different mother than my ex-wife, but she raised him as her own because he was like born like what was it, right on the cusp where like me and her had splitting up and I had seen my ex like once and then I left. And we got back together like 2 months before I left for the military, me and my ex-wife. And, her dad was Air Force and my dad was Air Force. And we were just like best friends. And that's the way it was awesome. And like she understood the life. And so when my son was born, I was surprised. His mother was like, hey, you're going to be a father. What do you want to do? I'm giving him up for adoption. And I'm like, whoa, like I'm graduating OSIT in 2 weeks. Like I have 10 minutes on the phone today and I just started my BlackBerry. I'm like, the BlackBerry takes 5 minutes to power on. And so this is my oldest son. He just turned 13 and he was born April 8th, 2011. And I didn't know. I had no idea. My ex-wife had no idea. My ex-girlfriend is his mom and she didn't tell anybody. When she gave birth, her father texted me and I got my phone the next day. So it's now April 9th and she's like, well, if you're going to keep him, pick a name. And I'm like, my head's exploding. So I go to my drill sergeant and I'm in tears. Now I may be this, like you said, like it's on paper, everything looks cool, but to me, it was just experience. I was a mess. So I'm like, I'm like, drill sergeant, I have a son. And he goes, congratulations, a baby boy. This big booming voice across the courtyard. I'm like, drill sergeant, I didn't know I was having a son. And he goes, oh, fuck. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, take your phone, go sit outside, come back in 30 minutes or something. And I hear him cracking up because this is the only drill sergeant that I couldn't get along with. And I'm there for 6 months. So he's cracking up. But at the same time, he's like, fuck, like Lawrence, I get it, dude. And I'm like, cool. I'm like, let me go sort this out because I'm not as my son.
Right.
That's just, I'm a farm boy. I may be a New York guy, but I was raised a farm boy. I was excited. And I got home, like we got a paternity test within, like I'm home 2 weeks later. And within a month we have a paternity test and he's mine. And I call up the AGR guys and I'm like, hey Diaz. And I had just met him and he's like, what's up? And I'm like, Can you pull my name back? And he's like, yeah, well, they don't even need MPs anymore. He's like, if you want to stay back, stay back. The only people who were going is somebody who actually was on the same wavelength, career length as me for the entire stint of the
Huh.
army. I did 10 years and we both joined at the RSP, which is a training National Guard thing, like you do before you go in. You know, it kind of builds you up, like that
Right.
pre-Q course. I pull back, and Diaz like, you can go teach them because our dudes they're coming back from Iraq. They get 90 days off. You know, then they get another couple months because New York State. So I'm like, yeah, well, they deserve it, but like, you know, what the hell do I do? Like when they all come back, I'm like, I'm gonna be this nobody who's just a brand new private. Like let me figure some stuff out so I'm not just somebody there. But I'd always been taught, like my dad was always like, if you don't want to do the shit job, volunteer to be in
Yeah.
charge of it.
I remember when I got out and I came home, you know, I still put on shower shoes and took a shower bag with me to my own bathroom.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're slowly
Yeah.
acclimating. But I mean, to us, we feel weird as hell. We say that, and somebody's like,
Yeah.
"Why?"
I mean,
Like,
it was just one of those things, man. Like I put on flip flops, shower shoes. I grabbed my shaving bag and I went to my own bathroom. And it was just like, you know, I open up my bag, I lay out what I needed for my, you know, my routine. And then it was just like clean it up, wipe down my sink, wipe down the mirror. Now, you know, it's been many, many moons, you know, and it's not that way anymore. But I mean,
now your wife
yeah,
wishes you could, right?
and it's just it's weird. And you know, when you go through certain things with certain people and you see who's with you, like when I went through reception, you could see when you got there that it was almost like, in a weird sense, man, it was like it was a clique. There was different cliques, you know. You had different guys that hung out, that did this, that did that, you know, and they stayed together. And it was very, very strange. And then you, if you opened your eyes and you glanced the room and you just looked around, you could see, okay, this dude's not going to make it. This dude is not going to make it. This guy definitely doesn't want to be here. And
I can see everybody you're
you know,
saying. We same experience, different
and
people.
it's funny because, like, and one of the guys I pointed out going through a reception, he comes up to me and he's like, Campbell, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, I don't want to be here. I'm like, well, I don't know what the hell to tell you, man. You know, what do you want from me? You know? He's like, but he's like, how do I get out of here? I says, I have no freaking idea, dude. Like, I'm here because I want to be here. This is what I wanted to do, you know? And
But in your head, and you're like, why is he coming to
exactly.
me?
And
You know, that natural leadership. You don't feel you have it, but you
right.
instill it. That's a good
Well,
thing. I mean, you can
I
see it.
I did, you know, I guess I was, you know, a lot of these guys were E1s, you know, I was already E3 when I went in, you
Yeah.
know.
And that was a great thing back then. I mean, they started
Yeah.
prepping you not as a private. You got the private treatment, but when you got to AIT, they're like, yo, you're going to be a little bit above. Get ready
Yeah.
for a team. I like that they
And,
did that. And not to cut off, but what you're saying is I feel like you and we got the treatment of we were taught to compartmentalize back then. Civilian life too. It's like, yo, when you go home, you're going to be a little fucked up. They're like, you don't have time to decompress. Things are going to be weird. And we were harped on that all the time. They're like, break it down, compartmentalize it. And that's how we were taught to treat PTSD before we
yeah.
even got it. I mean, and PTSD, like I tell people, comes in many forms. You remember it from reception when you have that moral injury and you're like, whoa, life's actually
Mhm.
like this. I got to power through. I don't have a choice. So you forget some of the things until you said it to me. I didn't remember those dudes' names, but now they're all
Yeah.
popping up. That's
So
awesome. That's great,
we
man.
had we had one guy, and he it was so funny because a lot of people just think, oh, automatically, oh man, you get free haircuts, you get free clothes, you get free this, free that. I'm like, that's bullshit, man. I had to pay for my first, like, it. You have to pay for your first haircut. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, see, I was smart. Before I went, I shaved my head as bald as yours until I got there. And then when the drill sergeant came up and he ran his hand over top of my head, he felt it. He's like, you're good. So I didn't have to pay for my first $7 haircut when I went in.
then have it
Yeah,
deducted.
and
And
you know they gave you that pre card. You know your prepay, half your first pay on that card. I still have mine, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and it's one of the first cards. You
me
know,
too. Or Lost in the
right?
Woods, man.
Yeah,
Dead of Winter.
and staying, you know, and this kid, you know, they shaved his head. He looked like fucking Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean, and
Oh.
we we walked around and he was just acting goofy, man. He had this you know, they made us before they, you know, you got a lot of shit. They gave you Gatorade. You had to fill up that gate, dump out the Gatorade, fill it up with water, and you had to keep that in your side BDU pocket, you know what I mean, and walk around with that. And he's walking around, oh, this is my vodka and blah blah blah, trying to act goofy and shit. So a few days goes by and he thinks he's getting out. He thinks he's going home. And drill sergeant comes up to me. He goes, Campbell. Yes, drill sergeant. Get Douglas over there. Okay. Grab Douglas. Come back. Yes, drill sergeant. You two are going to go take Mr. Bean and go back to the barracks and you're going to pack his duffel bag. I was like, is he leaving, drill sergeant? No, but he is getting on a fucking cattle bus today because I want his ass out of here today, you know? So
What's that?
we sent him. We went back to the barracks, dude. We packed all of his shit in his fucking cattle bag. He thought he was going home, man. We took him right to the fucking cattle bus and got his ass on a cattle bus, and his ass went off to fucking shakedown, then to a barracks somewheres, man. But it's just funny because, like, you know, these are the memories, and
Nothing's ever that easy.
yeah, and
Nothing.
it's just like, you know, this is, and then there's like, you know, you get the guys that are like, oh, I need to get out of here and get out of here. If you really want out, you're going to get out.
If you want out, you're gonna get out. But that sounds like a cautionary tale because
You
it
know, and
is.
I look back on, you know, on my life with the military, and I've missed it tremendously. It's been many, many moons, you know. I didn't see any action. I didn't go anywhere. I was stateside. I didn't do a whole lot.
So
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying. When like I went to Gitmo, but I didn't. I may have hung out with these dudes. I may have learned their shit. I may have helped choose where these guys were going to
right.
settle after they got out of Gitmo just by listening to them talk and being like, you don't want to go there. And because I'm stuck there for a year. But to me, it's like I did the job that nobody wanted to do and is not special. Like we were the ones, we didn't know what the
Right.
fuck we would do.
And even
simple
to
as
this day, I mean, I have tons of friends, man, that have spent, you know, time overseas who have done tours. You know, if you look back on some of my episodes, my buddy Chad, who was part of the invasion of Iraq, you know, USMC, and I,
Badass.
he is. I mean, he's a great guy, and you know, I have other Army friends and buddies that were in that have gone overseas who have done different jobs and stuff, and they hold no remorse that I had to stay back. You know, they're
Half the people who were over there, they were in
Yeah.
Kuwait. They were like, you know, they hated it. They're like, we were part of the 7 out of the 10 that they
Mhm.
talk about. And it's like, oh shit, I was doing that stateside. They're like, yeah, we just got paid a little extra to do what you were doing.
You were doing, you know, private security on the civilian aspect. How did that go about?
I never really got a break from that because it was a family
Mhm.
business. I started that. I want to say we started in the office when we were young, and you know, we went to jobs, we weren't supposed to be at certain jobs, but that's how everybody learns. I mean, my dad, he is one of the most hardcore people I know, and he'll never tell anybody his stories. He's like, you want to tell them, you go ahead, break the taboo, and get the mafia to start working with local Jamaicans and Haitians. I mean, not even like because of the color. It was just like, these are the guys who are going to protect you while you're all infighting. My dad's like, look, this is my business. I'm the one who knows security. I just got back from this place overseas. You just got shot by your own people. Who are you going to trust? He's like, the guy standing here with 2 guns for you and has 2 people on each window. He goes, and the guy's got fake guys in the hallway who look like they're here at the hospital to be admitted, but they're actually protecting you. He's like, or you want to trust the 2 guys who you're not really sure about yourself, but you're showboating. And so like he got them to be like, all right, you make a point. He's like, well, while we're at it, he's like, why are you gonna go in there and get arrested for buying that property with the money legally? You're paying for it. He's like, but you're shutting down the block. You're fighting with that family over it. He's like, hire my guys. We'll close the block. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, who's going to tell us otherwise? He's like, I'll call the local police. Tell them, keep the block clear. And that's how he did it. He just used his connection. He's like, look, I was going to be a cop out here. And that's how I felt when I came back from Kansas. I'll be a cop in New York. And instead, the federal government hired me. My dad's like, oh, I'll open a business while I'm waiting for the local government to hire me. So I went into the weapons business. My dad went in security. So as a kid, I got to see all of that from him running nightclubs as the only white guy who could walk through South Jamaica, Queens with, unarmed, and everyone would be like, hey, what's up? Or move out of his way. Not because he was tough, because he was really nice to everybody. He was just like, you come here, I'm going to treat you equally. If you're an asshole, I'm going to call you an asshole and kick you out. So he had to sit down with the gangs and he had to sit down with the police and work with them. But each decade, he said it was a different element, in the city, like, government was a different element, more gung-ho and ready to fight, but not knowing why. And he said, then the people they were trying to fight, he said, would come up and they wouldn't know why they were so angry. And so he'd be like, I would just facilitate. He's like, and, usually they wouldn't fight because of it. And so, like, you hear about him a lot, but he'll never tell you a single story. He's one of those OGs, like we always adopted, and my dad was a farm boy, so he was born in 46. He was one of 16, and I was one of 7. So he brought us up, and he's like, look, if you guys want to do it, now you know how to do it. If you don't, at least you have a little skill and you know how to work, in an office. So I started doing that. And when I went to the Army, my dad would be like, hey, if you're home, you want to make a few bucks, this is prevailing wage, a couple hours down the street. And I'd be like, okay, I'll take the contract. Yeah. Or he'd be like, hey, could you start an armed contract? I don't have an armed guard right now. Or, his supervisor would call me. So I would go and do it. And then he'd be like, all right, there's your pay. And then I would be teaching a class and I'd be like, that's actually relevant information. Like I learned, to do this there. And I was talking with that dude who ended up being a Navy SEAL, and he told me to check this area because I never think to check it, but they learn it's. And so that's how I pick up things, and I'll take notes, and then I'll go and fact check it. And so like, it's just little things like that. Like, you ask people and you find out that they were a tech sergeant or they were Warrant Officer 5, and this dude's been flying choppers for 40 years. He can teach you everything you need to know about how engines are all the same. You just got to figure out what the propellant is, what the fuel is, and which metal is going to shave faster. And that's how I was able to learn to be like, okay, so security flows into weapons. Okay, that makes sense. That's a given. How does admin flow into security and weapons? How does, the evidence chain? How does my police knowledge? How does my Army MP versus my regular Army supply versus my standard Army, everybody's a soldier first? How does it all flow together? Right. And so I would make these little drawings and try and figure it out. And so by the time I realized I was awesome at security and I could figure out all these problems, I was like imagining the worst case scenario, writing it down, being like, okay, I know who to call if there's a terror attack. Like those dudes patrol in 3 vehicles. New York City is the only one that has 2 teams aside from another city that I'm not going to throw the name out. You can just Google it, but I can't throw out all the information. Right. It's there are WMD response teams. Those dudes I know are certified in weapons because I certified them. So let me put them down as who to call first. So when people are like, okay, you know who to call in case of a WMD attack, I'm like, well, it's kind of, they respond regardless. It's just the NYPD is going to call them after DHS. So why not just skip that, have the NYPD call DHS and I'll call them. And someone's like, I'll hire you because you know who to call. It's as simple as that.
Well, Brett, let me ask you this. So when you take on a contract or whatnot, and that comes in for some heavy detail or whatever, are there?
You don't know it's heavy until like you're there. You know what I mean?
So when you get one of these contracts or these, details,
I mean, I never know they're coming.
Do you have to go into like specific I guess like facilities, agencies, and say, hey, look, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what I got. This is what I have to do. I need some sort of clearance for this. I need something for this. Or do you have to plan all this out on your own? Or do you get, backing from other agencies and whatnot to help you? Or is this strictly a civilian routine?
No, honestly, if you know how the agencies all respond, you'll know that like you don't have to do anything. You just have to be there half the time, and that specific agency is going to come, or if you call that number, you know. So you already have that backing without officially having it. It's semantics because they have to respond. That's the law. So if you can legally say, I have insurance that covers if this happens, I'm your insurance if this happens, the dog is your insurance if I'm not paying attention, and, you know, the other dog is his insurance, plus the 6 team members who were way better than me, but I'm not going to tell you that because I'm concentrating on the big elements. So these guys they're really the hammer. Like, I'll hire you. You may be, you know, you may think, well, you know, I'm not the world's best shooter, but I can handle them. So I'm like, okay, let me put you through a motion. You come through and you show that you're able to shoot doubles. Like, you know, what we consider advanced, but other people, I mean, we consider basics, but it's really the basics for the advanced shooting. You shoot 2 rounds, you're not concentrating on, you know, the marksmanship. You're concentrating on the marksmanship of the first one. The second one, you're concentrating on the safety, follow-up, the click back. Your marksmanship's covered. It becomes second nature. You turned that reaction into a response. So that's how I kind of figure out my teams. And my teams are really the people you have to trust who you're going to rely on. And for me, it's all about information. So I get the agencies, and then I figure who's the best guy to respond to a situation if I know the agencies are just going to show up after the fact. Like, who can handle it before it becomes something big, and that way it never becomes an incident. So, I mean, I've responded to missing kids. I've solved shit just for free. When I was in Gitmo, someone had a missing family member. They called me and they're like, hey, how do I go about this? And I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I was like, well, I'm like, you don't have to call the police yet. I'm like, they're just going to call, you know, this and this. And this is somebody who I helped with their, they had a custody issue in Kansas. Their sister was missing and I was a cop there. That's why they asked. And I'm like, well, I can tell you right now, like, I can just look in the computer and probably find half this stuff. Hold on. And I Googled it and I'm like, well, you know, if this shit isn't going to pop up here, but I can find them there, then that's just, you know, and so I just put all that stuff together and I'm like, here, call these people. I'm like, I already made these phone calls. That your person's there. There's no other place they can be. Their social media shows it. And this was 2016. Okay. So I didn't even think about it. I wrote down to my friend, like, oh, by the way, like, I helped that kid who was missing. You know, it turns out she was with her boyfriend. She's underage. He's 21. You know, they're high as hell. This was way back, Tiger. So I'm like, yeah, it's, you know, like, the police found him, brought her back to her family. He got a slap on the wrist. It sucks, but that's how it happens. And that's really how these stories, I tell people, I'm not cool. I don't know more than the average person. I retain a little bit more, and so I know where to look, and that's it. And so I find the stuff that people are afraid to ask other people because they know I already work in a severe field, and I'm not going to judge you. If you say, hey, dude, I want to know how people are affected if they get shot with different bullets because I carry different bullets. I'm like, yeah, well, let me break that down. You want 9mm versus 45? Here's 9mm FMJ, 9mm hollow point. So I answer the questions before people even ask, and that kind of gives me a basis for the next thing. And so people don't need extra credentials when they're like, this dude already has A, B, C, D, and he already wrote down the answers for the credentials for this, so we're going to give him what he needs because he already knows it. He already wrote it down in his previous report. So extra information is sometimes good.
Also did some naval affairs, am I correct?
Yes. So the state side of the government, each state has to have a military branch to run their National Guard. Usually it's pretty simply named, but the New York's old. It's Department of Military Naval Affairs, and they're fused. But because New York was a large state, a lot of what they said was important. And our units didn't deploy out of New York, but they trained in Drum. We sent them to Dix. We sent them to Florida. So these guys, they had a lot of experience. I utilized it. I went base to base, and when I was doing OJT, I asked all the weapons guys. I learned what I called above the table and below the table techniques, like the Army way and the way the Army says you can't do, but they don't specify it because they know you have to. Like the, Birchwood Casey gun scrubber on a machine gun. One can, like if you use a gun spray or something to clean out the dirt and lube, we both know it's going to work. We both know it's not going to destroy the gun because let's say we've used it. But the Army, they only remember a sprayer they tested back in the 70s. And so they write down, don't use this sprayer. So everyone thinks you can never use a sprayer. So everyone's just doing it the old way. They're spending 10 hours cleaning machine guns and rifles after a range day. And you've been through it and I've been through it. So I'm working there and I'm like, God, like I'd go over to Supply Sergeant. I'd be like, here, use this. Like, come follow me. I'm going to give you a couple cans. Then just start buying it out of your, funds, your own pocket. It's $8 a can. If it saves you 8 hours, you get to go home a whole shift early. Once you put it, and you know what? Like that's the way you got to realize nobody cares. Nothing's personal until you make it personal.
So you're trying to cut time and cost at the same time.
Exactly. And I'm going out of my pocket. I'm using my own personal spray to clean 10 machine guns, but I'm showing how one can clean 10 machine guns in less than an hour. You just got to use an air gun after, and that's it. And so they went nuts. And it was simple shit like that changes the game. And so I would write down, use this sprayer, and I would send it out in an email to the Air Force. I send it out to the local bases, and that's how I spread as much as possible. That's how I used New York's leverage to get it spread to the big MP. I called it the Military Police Regimental Association. If I could get my law enforcement letters passed in New York, they would send them to DOD and the military police. The military police, if they said it was okay, DOD would say it was okay. So the retirement letters that are now in effect over the last 5 years, that's me, because I retired. I needed a retirement letter. The good guy letters for MPs, I wrote them one based on an NYPD letter I found on Google. I learned how to do Army formatting because I learned that admin. My dad taught me learn the admin. So when I got there, the dude's like, "Hey, can you rewrite this?" I'm like, "Yeah, just give me the format." So when I would ask, I'd be like, "Hey, can you send this to Big Army? It's just a letter about this, it just says this. I already wrote it out in the Army format. Just proofread it." And they would. They'd be like, "Okay, so this is a retirement letter, but we can replace it for all of our unit." I'm like, "Yeah, you can use it for the 442, the 105th, whatever, the 107th. Just switch out the letters or names. You're good." And they're like, "Okay." So then they would just add in the person's credentials on top of the police, like mount instructor for the urban warfare, or active shooter if it was the police side, and if you had enough. The training changes every 2 years. So I always tell people, I could have every credential in the active shooter guidebook, and I'm not up to date. I'll never be up to date, because you see how it used to be 10 years ago. It was 2 guys, then it was 4 guys, then it was whoever shows up, then it became 2 guys, and if you get more people, do a diamond formation. So people, they see that I've done all of it. That's how I get the certificate of this dude is a master instructor, because he's been doing it for now 15 years. He's got 10 years as an instructor. And so for me, I'm like 20 years is like solidifying master, because that's the old Army government adage, 20 years retirement, the old Roman legions. Once you get to 20 years, you're good. So to me, I'm like, you can master something much sooner than 20 years to everyone else. But if you're like, I'm a master, you're not trying to learn more. You're just like, let me retain the knowledge I have and move on to something else. But with the guns, I never felt like a master. I still don't. I treat every meeting with a gunsmith like it's new, and like this dude, he probably learned something either before me or after me. But if this shit is ever evolving, then he's got something to add.
The day you stop learning is the day you should walk away from whatever you're doing, because it's not going to help you. Your retirement, your step down from the military, how did that come about, and what year was that?
Oh, good question. I guess we've talked around it, but I retired because of the injuries to the spine. It was more that mentality that we were taught to push through and be better, and a little pain for a little gain, and so on. What makes the battlefield grow? Blood, blood, blood. What makes the green grass grow? You're taught push through it. You don't want to be the dude dropping blood on the field so that you have to somebody else carry you. So I always pushed through. When I was doing the guns and like teaching them, like I said, I was stupid strong. I didn't know. Everybody called me farm boy. I didn't know that every time I took the 50 cal with the barrel and put it on my shoulders, even though I was careful about it, I lifted it right, I lowered it. I didn't slam it because I'm like, that'll break my back. But it's 132 pounds. It's, what is it, a 53-pound barrel, and the weapon is, or it's 50-pound barrel with a 83-pound receiver. So when you put them together, either the M2 or the M2A1, doesn't matter. You're putting 132 pounds on your back, and with the BFA, add 6 more pounds, and you can't install a blank firing adapter at 50 cal unless you're an armorer who's been trained on the 30 level, which they got rid of the numbers, but it used to be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 10 was the user. You remember the manuals were -10 for the soldier. For the armor, it was -20. So your M16 would be 319-10. Mine would be 319-23 MP, meaning it just had the armor's manual, and then all of the additions that they had ever made were put in there, and that one's like basically done. I don't remember why they got the stupid number, like the end P, but I know it like that had all the additions in it. Then you so you had to figure out the numbers. You'd write it down, but you also the -10 wasn't included in the -20. So if you're an armorer who's trying to do a a BFA, a firing adapter on the 50 cal, you now have to get a technician who works on it because you have to replace that wiring on the end. And you actually have to, all those weird wires you see like strewn through the side of the 50 cals, 30 cals, the Mark 19s, that's actually done a specific way with wire twisters to a specific tolerance. And just to put a blank on a 50 cal, you have to redo 4 of those. So when I did that, I learned how to do it that day, and so that's how I remember that. Okay, the day you learned the blank firing adapters is the day you started chipping the spine a little bit. So that's how I'm able to kind of put things in perspective. Okay, you did that job, and that's the time you were running, and you did this, and that's must have been how that part broke. So that's how I related to the VA. I just steps and steps and steps. I was like, it must have broken down over time. You know, a couple more injuries in Guantanamo Bay from hand-to-hand bullshit. Nothing interesting. I was teaching martial arts. I was in the camps. You know, those people they're going to fight back. You call out a code snowball, which I'm not giving anything away. You Google it. It tells you that a riot or somebody fighting is a code snowball. So the person, if they wanted to get a reaction, just to write down, they had a riot that day so that they could show their hunger strike is going. You know, when we were in Gitmo, we were the ones under the camera the whole time. The news was there every week, and we were closing the bases for Obama, but we didn't know we were. So when I texted a guy a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, "Did you know you were part of history too?" He's like, "What history?" And I was like, I sent him the article about closing the camps, and he's like, "Yeah, we did that, but we didn't close the camps." I'm like, "No, we're the ones they're talking about. They mentioned our unit. We closed Camp 6, we closed Camp 5, which was maximum security. We were MPs who got sent there by mistake. We're not Echoes. 31 Echoes are MP correction officers. So we weren't there. We had been training for combat the whole time. That's why I'd been lugging a 50 cal on my back. That's why we're doing these off-road, Humvee missions, and then they give us MRAPs, and we're like, well, we're going to Gitmo, so we get thrown back into Humvees. You know, we got ramped up. We did a pre-mobilization, and then we were told, you're not going on the private security detail. The 107th is, even though you're both line units, we're going to treat you like platoon units. You know, you have 200 people. We're going to send 160 to Gitmo. We only need 40. They're like, but, we don't want to say we messed up. So, you find out a couple of years later, we weren't supposed to be closing the camps because we didn't know how, so we were flying by the seat of our pants. Luckily I was only in E4, so I didn't have to worry about it. But it was weird. So I taught martial arts because there was so much, even though you can spend 16 hours and 5 days a week in the camps, but on that day off, you were in your own head like, oh, I was sitting with Bin Laden's bodyguard. Like that dude pressed me. Why didn't I press him back? And you're like, granted, the FBI, the NSA, everybody had control of cameras, that we have our little codes. That dude called a snowball, so it's on paper. But now I'm always going to be on paper as shit, like Bin Laden's bodyguard, like snowball. I had to call it. That dude threw a cocktail on my friend. It sucks. And so you don't want to get in your own head. You don't want to start thinking about the pain you're feeling because there's nothing to do on the island about it. There's no MRI machines. There's in Cuba and Gitmo, you have to be sent to Florida if you get injured. If there's like a real injury that requires an MRI, anything above an X-ray, you have to get flown back to Florida. So now the technician and the weapons guy in me is like 60% of the soldier plus time. I start breaking it down. I'm like, damn, we don't even warrant a $600 MRI. So I had foot pain in Gitmo, which we just put a profile, don't run, do the bicycle, jog at your own pace. And I kept teaching martial arts. Like that tells you it just felt like, like I had torn something, but not something crazy. It was just numb. It was weird. So when I got back, I had a million injections. You know, I got put on orders, and at the whole time, I'm still working for the government. I'm still going in. They don't have anybody to replace me. Even when I retired, I'm still taking calls for the DMNA. I'm still teaching LUTAC. On the, you know, that they supply the ammo. I just go and teach it. I wasn't getting paid a bunch of money for it. It was nobody knew what to do. It was too quick of a retirement.
So after all this is what led up to your retirement out of the service.
Oh yeah, so I get back and it turns out it's an injured spine. It's like a bunch of compounding fractures, torn discs, broken, stressed, blah blah blah, and it's either you can have like, you know, a surgery every couple of years that, you know, you're laid up for 6 months, you're having a major spine surgery, or you get robotics and you can control the pain yourself. And whenever you need something taken out, just do it laparoscopically, so you're not, you know, you already had the bone grafts and stuff. I'm like, or not the grafts, they're called laminectomies, where they cut out part of the spine. They did my whole thoracic spine in one go. They took all the ridges off. Really? You can run your hand down, and it's smooth. It's very unsettling. And I mean, to me, it looks like a super organized Frankenstein. I posted it online. I think it's cool.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate your service and everything like that. And, you know, and I deeply appreciate you jumping on and shooting the crap with me today.
Well, I'll have to come down and get inked by you at some point. But hey, little lady, whenever you want to, you know, whenever you have some questions, if you can't have me on, but I can answer something, throw some my way. And I usually, like I said, if there's something I gave a story to, I'm going to try and provide a picture or a link. Just remind me. I'll send it to you.
Awesome.
Thanks, yeah, I'll take that.
Thanks again, man. I deeply appreciate it.